If your child was just diagnosed and there's a prescription on your counter you haven't filled, stay. I know exactly where you're standing because mine sat on the counter for 3 weeks. I'm a general practitioner. I have written this exact prescription for other people's children hundreds of times. Methylphenidate, a low starting dose, a follow-up in 2 weeks. I have sat across the desk from 100 nervous parents and told them, honestly, that it was safe. And then it was my son. And I couldn't do it. The bottle sat by the mail. I moved it every time I wiped that counter. 3 full weeks. This is the medication conversation. The one I promised you at the end of the last video, once the accommodations were in place. And I'm not going to hand you the pamphlet version. I'm going to tell you what I got wrong, as the doctor who should have known better, and the mother who still froze. Because the thing that kept me from filling that bottle was not a medical question. I knew the medical answer. The question underneath was quieter than that. Will this change who he is? Here's what most of us picture when we hear ADHD medication. A flat child, a quiet child, a kid who used to be a firework, sitting still now, a little switched off. The zombie. We picture trading the child we love for a child who's easier to manage. But that picture is actually backwards. And once I show you why, you will not look at that flat, switched-off child the same way again. I've been the doctor holding the prescription pad, and I've been the mother who couldn't pick up that prescription. Neither one made this easy. They just meant I got to be terrified with a medical license. So here's what we'll talk through. Why this decision is far less of a leap than it feels. Why the zombie is not the outcome. It's an error message. What medication actually does, and the one thing it will never do, and how this works in Canada. Who can prescribe it, what it costs, and what happens at school. How it happens at school. 4 things. Let's start with the leap that isn't the leap. The reason that bottle terrified me, the reason it may be terrifying to you, is that it feels permanent. Like signing something you can't unsign. That was the first thing I had backwards. Most of the medications we worry about work slowly. An antidepressant you can take for 4 to 6 weeks before you even know if it's helping. So you commit, you wait, you hope. And if that's wrong, you come off it slowly, over more weeks. That is a leap. Stimulant medication, the most common ADHD medication, does not work like that. It works in about 45 minutes, and it's gone by the end of the day. Which means a first trial can look like this. A quiet Saturday, you're home, nowhere to be, your child takes a low starting dose after breakfast, and then you just watch. You're not waiting 6 weeks, you're watching the same afternoon. Does homework start a little easier? Is the next morning less of a war? Or does he seem flat or cheery or not quite himself? Whatever you see, it washes out by dinner. Tomorrow is a blank page. Sit with that for a second, because it changes the whole shape of the decision. This is not a door that locks behind you. It is one of the most reversible things you will ever try for your child. You're not signing up for a year. You're running an experiment you can call off by bedtime. One thing before we go on. Medication works best sitting on top of the right supports, not instead of them. If you haven't put the accommodations in place yet, start with the last video on the IEP meeting. The link's below. Windshield first, then wipers. The doctor in me knew every word of what I just told you, and I still left that bottle on the counter because, reversible or not, I was afraid of what I'd see when it worked. Which brings me to the next thing I had most wrong of all. So let's talk about the flat child, the zombie, because that image is the single biggest reason a prescription stays unfilled in this country. And it is the most misunderstood part of the whole thing. Here's what the right dose of the right medication actually does. It doesn't add anything to your child. It doesn't install a personality that wasn't there. It turns the noise down. Picture trying to hold a conversation in a room where 6 radios are playing at once. That's the ADHD brain trying to start homework. Every thought at the same volume. The important one and the completely random one equally loud. The medication turns the radios down so the child can finally hear his own signal. So what about that flat kid, the switched off one, the one we're all afraid of? Here's the part nobody told me. That dulled zombie look is real. I won't pretend it never happens, but it is not what the medication is meant to do. It's what it looks like when the dose is too high or it's the wrong molecule for that particular child. The zombie is not the destination. It is the error message. It's the dashboard light telling you and your prescriber one word: adjust. Too high and you sand that child down. Dialed in and you get more of him, not less. And let me be straight with you, because trust matters more than a clean story. It is not free of side effects. The common ones are a smaller appetite and trouble falling asleep. That's exactly why a good prescriber starts low and checks in. Real, usually manageable, and worth watching for. Honest beats tidy. The day my son's dose was right, he didn't go quiet. He came to the kitchen table, he sat down, and he started the assignment. If you've watched the earlier videos, you know what that sentence cost us. The 3 hours he used to spend not starting one page of a worksheet. He didn't start because someone made him. He started because, for the first time, starting didn't cost him everything he had. He was more himself at that table than I'd seen him in a year. Not a different boy, the same boy, with the radios turned down. So when a parent asks me, will it change who my child is? The honest answer is 2 halves. No, done right, it doesn't change who they are. It clears the runway so who they are can take off. And if it does seem to change them, if they go flat or gray or gone, that's not the medication working. That's the medication asking to be adjusted. Either way, the answer to the fear is the same. Watch and talk to your prescriber. It is never don't try. But I have to be just as honest about what this medication cannot do, because I've watched parents. I have been that parent who quietly hoped it would do everything, and that hope sets you up for the second mistake. Medication is not a treatment plan. It is only one lever. Here's a sentence I wish somebody had said to me on day 1 from a psychologist named Russell Barkley, who I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Pulls don't teach skills. Medication can turn the radios down. It cannot teach your child to break a task into steps, to hand in the work he just finished, to fall asleep at a reasonable hour. It just opens a window. What you do while that window is open, that is the actual work. The routine, the accommodations, the skills, the sleep, the sport, the one trusted adult. So, the child who does best is almost never the child on medication alone. It is medication plus the plan. The accommodations from the last video, a consistent bedtime, a teacher who's on side. Think of it as the difference between clearing the fog off the windshield and actually knowing how to drive. Medication clears the windshield. It does not drive that car. And while we're being honest, let me take 2 fears off your counter, because they kept mine there too. First, if I medicate him now, I'm setting him up to abuse drugs later. The evidence actually points the other way. Kids whose ADHD is actually treated tended to have lower rates of substance problems down the road, not higher. Untreated ADHD is the biggest risk. Second misconception, we'll be stuck on this forever. Maybe not. Some kids need it for a season, some for years. Some try a summer off and learn something useful. Either way. Because it's in and out of the body so fast, you never lose the right to ask the question again. It is not a one-way street. Medication didn't fix my son. It was never going to. What it did was make everything else we were already doing finally start to work. Which leaves the most practical question, the one I get most in the comments. Okay, but how does this actually happen here in Canada? Who do you even ask? Here's something a lot of parents don't know. In Canada, you may not have to wait a year for a specialist to even start this conversation. A pediatrician or child psychiatrist can diagnose and prescribe, but the wait for one can run months, sometimes far longer, depending on your province. Your family doctor, a GP like me, can often diagnose ADHD and prescribe the first-line medications too. Many of us do it every single week. So your first step might be a longer, dedicated appointment with the doctor you already have, not a year on a list. On cost, this varies by province, so I'll point you, not promise you. The common stimulants come in brand and generic names. Generic methylphenidate is usually inexpensive. Some of the newer, longer-acting brands cost more. If you do have private insurance, a lot of it may be covered. If you don't, look it up by your province's public drug plan. In Ontario, for instance, kids and youth under 25 without private coverage fall under OHIP+. Other provinces run their own formularies. And just ask the pharmacist what the generic costs. They'll tell you, a completely normal question. And school? Most ADHD medications now are once daily and long-acting. You give it at home in the morning on purpose so that the school never has to be involved. If your child needs a dose during the day, every Canadian school board has a medication administration process. It is paperwork. It's not a battle. Put it straight into the plan we built in the IEP video. None of this asks you to have it all figured out. It asks for one appointment, one honest question, and a Saturday to watch. That's the leap, the actual whole leap. So, will medication change who your child is? I pull that prescription. Week 3, Saturday morning, exactly the way I told you, just to try it. And no, it did not give me a different son. It gave me a morning where he heard me for the first time. An afternoon where an assignment got started. A version of him that was already in there, that the noise had been sitting on. Here's the part I didn't expect, and I'll say it because someone needs to say it to you. When it actually worked, I didn't feel relief at first. I actually felt guilt. 3 weeks that prescription went unfilled. What if I had filled it on day 1? And I had to learn the thing I'll tell you now. You did not fail your child by being careful. You were being a parent. That bottle on the counter isn't neglect. It's love. But it is love that is frightened. Fill it when you are ready. Just don't let the fear make the decision for you. It's less of a leap than it feels, and gone by dinner. That flat switch-off child isn't the goal. It's the error message. Adjust, don't quit. Medication is a lever, not the plan. Pills do not teach skills. And in Canada, your own family doctor, or GP, may be the first door, not a year-long wait. That prescription isn't just sitting on the counter anymore. It's a small, ordinary bottle in a cupboard now, next to the vitamins and the other medications. Nothing about it changed my son. It just turned the radios down so I could finally hear him. The medication was never going to give me a new child. It gave me back the one I already had. If you haven't got accommodations in place yet, watch the IEP video next. That's the ground this stands on. And thing here is for informational purposes only, and it isn't a substitute for a conversation with your own child's doctor. You already knew that.